Hi, this session we're going to look at the delivery plan in just a little bit more detail, explain a lot more about how it's made up and certain usage of it and how we keep it up to date, and other circumstances we can look at if there's a change to scope and how we therefore can adjust the delivery plan to suit. Remember, the key element, first of all, to remember is when we put the delivery plan together, which is what we do in the design phase, which is when we are actually putting a lot more detail behind the project, ready to plan, the key area of planning to go and run the project. One of the main things we're going to do at the end of that particular phase is obviously lock in, baseline the delivery plan, like all the other documents and anything else we put together in that particular phase. Remember, by baselining, we mean now an agreed state at this point in time, and therefore from here onwards, it's basically going to change control, but it's an agreed state which we can start the project off with. So we've got something to monitor it from here onwards. Where we started, and then as things change, we can, look back over and compare against the original baseline. We'll look at baselines in another session in more detail. Main thing is to remember that during that phase, when we've allocated requirements to our time boxes or our work packages, more detail up front than further down the project, because they're further away, we'll wait till we get there to be more detailed about those, then that's it, it's locked in. And we need to do that because we need to lock it in so we can guarantee at this point in time the end date of the project. Especially if that's critical and it's got to stay there. But we'll look at that in a moment. Okay, so we've allocated the requirements. We need to do that because we need to understand a lot more about who's going to build them, any environments we need to have in place, therefore we get a better understanding about the costs and the time and lock it in. So remember, during design, the time box needs to be a certain length. If we need to adjust it, we can do that while we're in design before we sign it all off. But once we've signed it off, we need to keep it there. Remember, a lot of the time we're putting these boundaries in here on the blue lines in the plan from an increment stage or time frame point of view at a bit of an increment level, because we want to make decisions, for example, related to budgetary controls, controlling the project, make sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves, various stages, if you like. Sometimes you can call them milestones, but that's not the pure reason behind it. Main thing is a business go, no-go decision points about what's happening here. So that's usually the prime consideration about where these intersections are from the blue line point of view throughout the project. Remember, if you're related to a program, there may be decisions coming out of there that you have to relate to and understand how the project's progressing, which may trigger other projects. So these may be prerequisites for other projects and other programs. So or other parts of the program, I should say. So remember that as you're going through why we have these. When we're looking at the, when we're running the bank teller upgrade program a few years ago, then because it was a new concept to have quality of service and prioritizing applications on the network and recognizing that, then this was something we had to pilot. But we needed to prove the concept could work first. Once that was happened, we did it at a high level to say, yes, at a high level we can get that, the detail will come later. This gave us the trigger to then kick off the rest of the projects and the program overall. Right? Tried for years beforehand, and of course, for various reasons like technology wasn't up to it, we couldn't run the program. Now we could, or at least we had to prove that we could this time. And that's one of the reasons why I have these decision points. So the green boxes here are looking at the time boxes we may have in place. We want to control the length of work. The orange ones are representing work packages, where the length of work might vary simply because we've got to complete the work. There's no two ways about it. And that's okay, because in the end, that particular increment's controlling that whole time frame if you want. So I might have, say, 4 weeks worth of working here from a time box point of view, and only 1 week's worth, which might be maybe in 2 weeks, but the whole increment's controlled by the time box. So the 2 weeks worth that maybe end up on the work package is okay, it's still within the 1 month time frame, or the 4 week time frame for that increment. So you get the picture, you can control both ways. Again, it's about applying what the project needs and how you want to deliver the solution at that point. Okay. Now, I've drawn deployment down here underneath as an overall continuous phase or activity as you wish throughout, because we're going to deploy stuff as we go through. But I've also incorporated a few in here as independents, because you might keep them offline for a while and then join the mainstream, or maybe not even start this until we get to the end of this third one, at the end of this fourth increment, for instance, and deploying something, and then we bolt them together. Intrinsically, that's what we did with the bank teller system. We proved the applications at the gold end. We tested them on a pilot and an offline situation. We did the same with the bronze and the silver applications, and then we finally bolted them together and put them out there as a complete piece of work. Mind you, we're still under pilot. We're still under project control before we started running the main part of the project, which was the rollout a bit further down the track here. That's what the situation. So whatever you feel you need about deploying, or when you need to deploy, keeping offline in little independent segments, or deploying straight from, for instance, from the second increment, we might be deploying something in here. It all depends on how it works. Another thing to note, of course, in my delivery plan, that work packages, though I haven't done that here, but time boxes can also overlap each other. If you've got the resources and you know how to manage the resources, they can overlap. You can run parallel systems that might be doing different work. If you're building a website, for instance, somebody might be putting the coding together, another group might be putting the wireframes, another group may be building the graphics at a high level. Some of those resources, those members, may be the same member throughout. So I might have one member in this particular time box who's working in the first one here, and also may eventually work in that one here. And the same way here, you might have overlaps of resources, the same person working across 3 different streams for various reasons, right? So bear that in mind as well. They can overlap. But remember, key thing is, once you've baselined it at the end of the design phase, the time box's length do not change. You only change what is in them. So at that point, only requirements change. So only requirements move in the delivery plan. Only requirements move, change throughout the delivery plan from there onwards. This does not normally change. Right? I say normally on purpose. And that's something we're going to look at in a moment. Okay? So we're running along through our project, and as things are happening, we have issues with requirements. Some, for instance, we run out of time. In this particular time box, I might move it into here. I might take a requirement out of here, move it over here, for instance. One might move from here over to here. Right, so the red arrows are showing requirement or requirements that we've moved to make room from a time cost point of view to complete the work that are the main objectives for that particular time box, and therefore the requirements we need to complete to achieve that objective, so we can deploy something at that point. Okay. Similarly, obviously, if we're actually working well, we might pull something from here, for instance, into here. We might pull something from here into this one, and from here into that one, for example. So these are requirements moving across because we gain time, and therefore we can bring them in earlier. We're not changing anything, it's still the same scope. We're not changing the delivery plan overall, except that where we're doing the work. And this is quite fixed. This is what people do. We do this. Right? So don't think you can't. It's just making sure we control and keep the documents up to date just to reflect that. The delivery plan, any time box representation, use requirements lists, whatever you've built. Some use burn down charts in project level, because burn down is the opposite from a sprint and scrum point of view, where we're showing the overall burning through the requirements throughout the whole project, what we completed, middle of doing, and what we yet to do. So it gives a more complete view from a project perspective, right? And that's where the difference is. So we're moving requirements up and down our project. Now, let's consider something. The business come along and say, we want to add a new requirement. So now we've got something different. So let's put that in here. Right, so now we get a new requirement to be added. So we're increasing the scope, right? And it's a must, it's a mandatory, it's something that has to be delivered, right, to work. It's considered a must. And say, just for argument's sake, it's worked out to be about 10 days worth of work, right? 10 days effort. Overall, it's quite a piece of work. You know, like a website, I want to suddenly put in secure online payments, for example, or I need to add a new section to my application document for special cases or something. Now I need to add that in. So let's assume, for example, that happens around about here, right? So this is the new requirement comes up, and you sit in a workshop and you work out initially what it is, and therefore how long it's going to be, and that requirement is something that they decide they want to put in. So now you've got to find out how you're going to schedule that in, because at the moment you can't impact too much on the plan. So the first option you have, right? So the first option, let's look at some options, right? the first option we have is to look at what contingency I have in my project to make place. So, something comes in, something comes in, therefore something's got to go out, right? Something comes in, something's got to make way for it. This is the normal thing, right? Now, hopefully that will be the case. I'm able to move either a group of requirements, usually ones that aren't so critical, right? Like the could haves, for example, which may be moved out further down the list to make way for the new requirement, or a mixture of coulds and maybe a couple of shoulds, or maybe something grouped around a particular requirement itself. You might decide one page on the website isn't quite so critical. You can go into a whole should have for that website, or even a could have for the moment, like resources or something rather. You need to have contact pages. Or another section, the policy document. So you've got to think, have I got the contingency? Is there something I can move out at the moment to make way for that 10 days? Right. Now, if you have, brilliant, because what you do is you replace them all, you just redesign the delivery plan to take that in. You don't change the time boxes, of course, you keep them as they are. You just shove a whole pile of requirements that makes that way. For instance, that might be a 10-day time box, and you move some other stuff elsewhere. Right. Or whatever it is you need to reconfigure. Because this is what you need to do as part of recommendations at the time when you go back and say, well, here's the first option. Second option, because you might not have enough contingency, now you've got to think about what can I do next? Remember, first thing, preserve the delivery plan time frame. So what can we do next? We can actually add a time box into somewhere, maybe, for example, here in this third to last increment, I might be able to put a time box in there to take up that extra requirement, right? So this will be the new time box, right? So now we're going to put that in here. Okay? Now, yes, it doesn't impact on, well, say no, it doesn't impact on the time, but yes, it impacts on costs. Well, of course it will, because now I need extra resources to come in here. This is the point here. So I need extra resources to take up that extra time box. Okay, so what has to happen? The main thing is, as long as the business and the one with the right authority signs off and says, that's okay, we can give you more money, we can get some slack from somewhere else, we'll get the budget for you to pay for those 10 days, and we'll still preserve the end of the project. Nothing wrong with that. We're still preserving the end date, which is key factor initially, right? Cost is also a factor because it has an impact on the return on the investment and the overall budget. But remember, budgets are flexible. If the business want to make them flexible, they can do. They just want to control the spend most of the time. So the second option is to new time box inside, right, the current delivery plan, the current DP, right? But the main thing here is it has to have authoritative sign-off. Authoritative sign-off. If the business are okay to sign that off you go. This is not a problem. We have to be flexible and creative with the plans and how we run projects throughout. But at the end of the day, if the business, that's what they want, and they're prepared to sign on and understand the impact, that's the whole point here, right? Not a problem. Now, it might be that you turn around and say, well, actually, that isn't going to work too well to put the change in that particular time box within the current delivery plan because we can't get the resources, we don't have time to get that part of the requirements built in detail, or at least understanding an overall view of that, right? So the next option, the third option, might be to extend the project, now it's not to scale really, and put that in here instead. So now we've got the new time box here for my 10 days, right? Yes, now we're impacting on the delivery time frame, okay? So, in a sense, because the original project is still going to deliver in the time we've asked it to. This is now an added requirement, and at the moment, if the business are okay that we do that right at the end, we have sort of 2 end dates. Nothing wrong with doing that either. 2 end dates, because at the end of the day, so long as they authorize that change and are happy with that situation and sign it off, then that's what you need to do. So you could put it, so now I'll have 2 end dates. The original one is still preserved, and I have another end date now, and it's signed it off, so now I've got an extra time but an impact on the delivery plan. So you just re-baseline the delivery plan, of course, right? So, third option is to place time box for the new requirement at end of current delivery plan, right? Which will extend the project overall, but still preserve original dates. So still preserve original end date, original end date, right? But as I said, the key thing there is, again, so long as they authorize and sign it off by business. So this is business signing this off with the right authority. Okay. Now, if they turn around and say, well, actually, we need that particular requirement out before some of these others, which is probably quite logical and quite realistic, you know, the resources page isn't quite so crucial, for example, or that particular segment of the document or whatever it happens to be is not quite so crucial, what we could actually do is move something else there instead. So we could go back one step and take this time box and move that time box out here, right? So whatever time box it is, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's time box 12, now comes in here instead, right? And we actually do the work we needed to do for the new requirement within that time, that increment, that time frame as it is. So that's the fourth option. Now, all we're doing now is really changing the real end date of the overall project to a certain extent, although we've still got an end date here from that part, and we do the resources page there. You could argue that they may say, don't bother with that at this particular date for the project. We can drop that out altogether and do that from a BAU point of view, business as usual, in an operational type change. It doesn't need it. The main framework of the project's up. So you've got that sort of option too. So the fourth option here, of course, is now to replace a current time box with the new one, with the new requirement time box, and move this one, move the original time box outside the project. We'll just extend the project to end of project. Right? In other words, really, we're doing that as the last time box in the project. For example, this is just the general principle, really. Okay. Again, as long as it's got authority sign off, all these really are about, these three is about having authoritative sign off. And I've written it there, authoritative sign off. And by authority, I mean by, you know, from a business perspective, they really sign this off. Right? Because first one, it's just having a cost. The other three really having a cost and a time frame, depending on how they want to look at how the project's going to finish. Right? Right. The fifth one, as I said, is replace a requirement or a set of requirements, by requirement, it could be a high level one, with the new and complete original requirements that is replacing in operations, for example. Operations, BAU, business as usual. So we've got these really different ways of looking at it. But the key thing here to work out, first of all, is one, it's got to have authority sign off. Go a step at a time is the other. One thing at a time, make the recommendation so they can make an informed decision about which one fits, right? So you might have to jump to one of these already. So you say, well, we can't do that already. We really need to offer option 3 or 4 because of certain circumstances, right? But as long as they know what's happened before and why you can't do the other one. So make sure the business understand this, because at the end of the day, it's their project, remember. So they need to sign that off. So just bear that in mind, work that out. Obviously, all the other details are filled in between. We're looking at the overall recommendation at the point, having understood what information you need to help make that decision and work with the business. But again, once you've done all that, you re-baseline the delivery plan, and this now becomes your new delivery plan. So now you've got two major baselines to compare against rather than all the little increments in between, right? But at the same time, the main thing is being signed off is the change. So, whatever the business need and whatever they're willing to sign off, that's how you make it work, right? So bear that in mind when you're running projects in general format, actually, because all things are possible with the right change and the right control. That's all it means.